I guarantee you an instantaneous increase in your win rate, not changing a single other approach. So in a negotiation, your job is to diminish the negatives by
Is the secret to good negotiation is creating the illusion that the other side is in control.
right.
And how do we go about doing that? Welcome back to the show, everybody. I've got a very special guest. I've read his book. I've watched so many videos. Chris, I feel like you're a long lost brother. I've watched so much content on you. And honestly, it's just so interesting. And I've learned so much about negotiations. And I think today we can really give some insight to our viewers on negotiation. So let me give you a brief background of you real quick. I've got Chris Voss. He's the CEO of Black Swan Group. He spent 24 years with the FBI as a hostage negotiator. During his time, he worked on approximately 150 kidnappings worldwide. He was trained in the art of negotiating by not only FBI, but also by Scotland Yard and Harvard Law School. All that time, he managed to author a few books too. One that we're going to touch on today is one of my favorites. It's Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. Chris, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm happy to be on. Thank you very much.
You've had a very interesting life.
Yeah, interesting. It's a good term, right? Hopefully, live an interesting life, live a great story. That's what I
Yeah,
tried to do. Yeah.
you've definitely done that. How did you get into law enforcement? Was this something in your family, or are you the first to do it?
Not necessarily the first to do it. Distantly related. My uncle was in the criminal investigation division in the Army. My father was a Marine MP. But I got interested in it because I saw a movie when I was 16 that inspired me.
Mhm.
Super Cops, about two New York City cops. And I was really impressed with how creative they were and how much good they did, how much fun they had. The community loved them, and I found it very inspirational. So that's what started me on that path.
Yeah. And you didn't just jump right into this. You had quite a path. Can you walk us through your path to get into this career?
Yeah, well, after I got out of college, Iowa State University, 4-year degree, joined the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Great town, great police department. I mean, heck of a town and a really effective police department. My father had higher aspirations for me. I got a
Doctor?
Well, anything that required a college degree, probably.
Yeah.
Of course, like most fathers, he wished his son would go into business with him, and like most sons, I chose not to.
Right.
But then he thought, well, he wanted to get me interested in federal law enforcement because at least that required a college degree. Kansas City Police Department did not. He introduced me to a friend of his that was with the Secret Service. I talked to that guy and he said, I traveled all over the world with the Secret Service. And, I grew up in Southeast Iowa, small town in Iowa. To me, crossing a state line was a big deal.
I remember those days. Now, did you
Yeah,
play eight-man
man.
football? Or did you play 11-man football in that school?
Now we had enough people in the high school to field an 11-man football
Oh,
team.
did you? Okay.
But so then the thought of traveling all over the world, at the time, I had no idea the differences between the federal agencies. Secret Service wasn't hiring, the FBI was, and in rather large numbers. It was a first of a 3-year hiring push. And so I got in the first year and never looked back. I originally was going to be on a SWAT team. I was on the SWAT team with the FBI, and I had a recurring knee injury. So I like crisis response. I think it's important that decisions be made. I think the risks and costs of comfortable inaction, as John F. Kennedy said, is extremely high. And so when I realized I was going to keep getting hurt on SWAT, we had hostage negotiators. I didn't know exactly what they did. It didn't sound like it was hard. And so it took me a while to get on the team. I was initially rejected, but once I became a negotiator, it was far more satisfying, far more complicated and challenging than SWAT ever was. And I loved it.
Then you started off at a hotline, right? What kind of hotline? Was it a suicide hotline?
Well, it was a crisis hotline. I
Crisis hotline.
was, when I initially got applied for the negotiation team, I was rejected, appropriately so, because I was unqualified, other than a desire to do it. I didn't have a psychology degree. I hadn't been a hostage negotiator in a police department. I didn't have anything on my resume. And the woman running the team said, "Look, if you want a shot at this at all, go volunteer on a suicide hotline." And I happened to find a crisis hotline that she had volunteered on herself, Helpline. It was founded by Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking. Actually, he was credited with founding it, but it was really his wife's idea, Ruth Stafford Peale. She came across the idea and she said, "Norman, we're going to do this." So they did. And that really gave me the edge in so many different ways because it was operationalizing emotional intelligence for the benefit of others before the term emotional intelligence was even coined. And that was what really got my start.
Oh, it's an amazing way to get started. You know, when we go into negotiations, I mean, obviously you had some high stakes. How do you prepare for a negotiation?
Yeah, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your highest level of preparation.
Hmm.
And so a negotiation is a perishable skill. So you got to every day you got to keep your skills sharp. So to me, I learned a process on a crisis hotline um, that was effective. And so I had faith in the process. And that was my real preparation. And I had also learned on the crisis hotline the perishable nature of the skills. And using them doesn't keep them sharp. You need some intentional practice. And my favorite analogy for that is Tiger Woods. Like Tiger Woods probably spent more time on the practice courses than he did on tournament courses. I mean, he was a big believer in practice and coaching. He got coached. Tiger Woods had a swing coach. When he was winning every tournament in sight, he worked with a coach. I had been on the hotline for about a year and I didn't realize that using it didn't always make my skills sharp. And when I came up for the 1 year review on the hotline, they failed me. He said, "You got a bunch of bad habits that have snuck in on you. You're effectively," they said, "your emotional intelligence, because you haven't paid attention to it, is diminished. You've gone into giving advice, which is this great temptation. Advice is very self-satisfying. It doesn't do the other side any good.
Right.
And emotional intelligence is not about giving advice. Empathy's got nothing to do with advice." And I really learned the difference then. And I also learned that you need intentional practice. So by the time was in a real live hostage negotiation, a bank robbery with hostages, number one, I knew the process. I had faith in it. It was the best chance of success. Not perfect, just better than anything else. And I practiced on a regular basis. I mean, on any given day, I'm engaged in all sorts of low stakes conversations just to try to have a positive impact on somebody because I knew I'm going to be in a negotiation where I need to have a positive impact. So I do a lot of small stakes practice.
So every day you're practicing. How do you do that? You just try and read people as you're going through the day?
Yeah, it's a combination of reading and then articulating what your read is.
Mm,
That's the real critical distinction with tactical empathy.
right.
I saw this great documentary called The Human Factor about Mideast peace negotiations, mostly through the Clinton years of presidency. And it started with Bush 41, and it goes all the way up to the first time that Donald Trump is president. But it really focuses on the Clinton years. And the negotiators in there, they talk about empathy as understanding where the other side's coming from. All right, that's only step one. If you don't articulate that understanding, if you don't outline what it is you think they see, nobody feels heard until you tell them what you think you heard. And then you're open to correction. Like if I say to you, well, I understand where you're coming from. You don't know that I really do. But if I say, it seems like this has really hurt you. Now you have an understanding of what I think it is. And if you were hurt, you'd be like, yeah, I appreciate that. Or maybe you weren't hurt, you were just angry. No, I'm not hurt, I'm angry. That's the difference between I understand and demonstrating understanding. And that's what you really got to do.
Okay. When and again, your negotiations are a little higher stakes in the real estate deals that we work on, but
Well, hold on. I mean, and see, your biggest problem is your biggest problem.
right. Okay.
So people react and you adapt everybody adapts to the urgencies of today. So maybe on an absolute scale on the outside, you don't have a life on the line, but you feel like you got livelihoods on the line. Or in real estate, you got somebody's hopes and dreams at stake.
Right.
So I would never diminish the degree and importance of impact of anybody's negotiation, because what you're dealing with is critical for your life today. So, and that's why the principles apply both for you and the people that you're talking to.
There's something that is to be said about the empathy, because in real estate, we have our client that we're representing. So we're always just worried about them. And I think you're exactly on point. If you come into the negotiation thinking about what does the other side want and need too, I think there's a lot higher chance of getting a deal done if you take all that into consideration.
And how do they feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many mistakes that are made inadvertently,
Yeah.
because you don't know how to level with people. And tactical empathy is really learning how to level with people. Like if you got bad news for your client in real estate, typically you try to solve it before you relay it. And ideally, you don't relay it at all. What's the problem there? The problem is you're leaving your client in the dark. And uncertainty is worse than bad news, because in uncertainty, people think of the worst case scenario. And whatever your bad news is, it's probably not the worst case scenario. And even if it is, your client wants to know because they don't want to be kept in the dark. I mean, I hate being kept in the dark. I hate being caught off guard. Why? Because I'm human. So the real issue is how do you level with people? How do you become a straight shooter? How do you not keep them in the dark? And simultaneously let them know what's going on, and also let them know that you're working on it.
Yeah. The beginning of the negotiation is probably key, right? So when you begin a negotiation, how do you read the room? What's the first thing that you're looking for?
All right. So, and just because you start off well doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
Right.
And actually, in point, the beginning is the second most important moment. The second most important moment.
Yeah, I'm sure the end is.
The end is even more important. That's why, like when I was doing speaker training, they said you start with your second funniest joke, because you're going to end with your best humor. And every conversation, the end of each conversation seeds the next conversation, which is why we always say the last impression is a lasting impression.
Mm-hmm.
So get back to your original question. Read the room. Read people for what you see, not what you hope they are. Like when you're coming in and you read the room and somebody looks distracted, what are they distracted by? It's probably been a stressful day. They look distracted, then you can say, seems like it's been a tough day. Instead of, how are you? Hope you're having a great day. So dial in and read, and then respond with an appreciation. So yeah, anytime you interact with a client, you're going to get a really solid read of what's on their mind. Are they distracted? Are they unhappy? Are they struggling? And you throw out an observation with an open to correction, because they could look upset when in point of fact, that's how they look when they're thinking really hard. Like I'm one of these guys that when I'm really thinking and I'm really listening, I look angry, but I'm just focused. I'm just thinking. So you could say to me, it seems like you're having a tough day. And I'll say, no, 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 I'm just, I'm thinking really hard. But you let me know that you're observing me. You're trying to see who I am at the moment. And I'm going to appreciate that. And then if you're open to correction, then cool. We instantly have a collaboration. And that's what you're really trying to do. You're trying to get into collaboration as soon as possible in the conversation.
The fundamentals of a good negotiation strategy. Can you kind of walk us through what those look like?
There's always information you're in the dark about. So what's the fundamental that you just asked me about? Get the other side talking first.
Okay.
Great negotiation is about an emotional intelligence gathering of information as quickly as possible. So, we may be just starting, and I'm going to say, it seems like you probably got some thoughts about this, because I need the information that's in your head. And so instead of laying out my perspective first, laying out my price first, laying out my perspective first, I know that I need the information that you have and your perspective on it. And so the first fundamental principle is get the other side talking in a way where they want to talk with you. And then that makes you smarter, which may change your position, may change your potential outcomes, because there's always information you don't have. So great negotiation is about finding out what's in the other side's head first.
Very good. You said one thing in one of the interviews I was watching is the secret to good negotiation is creating the illusion that the other side is in control.
Right.
And how do we go about doing that? How do we give them that illusion of control?
The illusion of control will come from either a calibrated question, what most people think of as open-ended questions, principally what or how. Stick to what or how. Don't go with tell me more. Can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me more about that as a closed-ended question? By definition, can you? That's a verb. And it's actually you're seeking yes. Say more about that, or tell me more about that. Those aren't open-ended questions. Those are statements. If you were to write that out, you'd write that out. You put a period at the end. That would make it a statement or even a command.
Yep.
What are you thinking? What are your goals? Those are open-ended questions that start with the word what. How would you like to proceed? That's an open-ended, calibrated question, starting with the word how. Now, each one of those words actually has a different job. What is about finding out what the obstacles and the challenges are. How is about how you're going to overcome those obstacles and challenges. People love to tell other people what to do and how to do it. And that's giving the illusion of control to the other side. People feel very comfortable with that. It's very deferential. Some people are wrongly told you got to seize control. You got to take control of the interaction. Well, if you dig into that a little bit, that's realizing the human nature need to be in control. So as soon as you satisfy that need with the other side, they're willing to be guided. This is about guiding people to the right outcome, not controlling them to it. So what and how questions are great ways to give the illusion of control. Make the other side feel like they're in control. They'll relax. They'll be much more open to ideas that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. How much weight do you put on body language?
Your body language read. I once heard a woman who really understood psychology, and she said, you're going to guess correctly about a third of the time. And she says, now that's a pretty high percentage. However, that means 2/3 of the time you're wrong. So I could look angry. I could be concentrating. I could look angry. I could have gas. If you read me for anger, you're wrong.
Right.
So this whole body language thing is like very rough guessing. Take it in more general terms and use the term affect. Their body language, their facial expression shifts in behavior. Now, if somebody's affect shifts, something just crossed their mind. You don't know what it is. So take the body language as clues that you've got to gently dig into, and then use a label or a question. What's on your mind? Seems like something just crossed your mind. I'm on a Zoom call a couple days ago, and I'm reading the body language of one of the individuals on the other side of the table as being friendly and a little embarrassed that his colleague was being too assertive. I now know that as he was embarrassed because his colleague was being assertive on his behalf, and he was actually hiding that he was the one that was causing the problem. So that's a 180-degree shift of what it looked like initially and what it turned out to be. I simply continued in the conversation continued gathering information gathering, without placing a bet on what that body language meant, one way or the other. So the original question is, how much emphasis do I put on body language? Something's there, you just don't know what it is. And if you place your bets on the wrong color, the wrong number, the wrong chip on the table, 2/3 of the time you're going to be wrong.
That's kind of a tough one. I was listening to one of your videos last night. You were talking about, I think it was a bank that somebody had, and weren't sure in the beginning. There were 7 people in there. It turned out there was only 2, and you guys were
Right.
listening to this guy, and he actually wanted out himself.
Yeah.
Um, that story was amazing to me. How you guys, just listening to the tone of this guy's voice or what he was saying, you guys figured out that he wanted out. What was a trigger there? Was it just from listening to what he's saying? Was it the tone in his voice? What made you guys decide that let's see if he wants out?
Well, what I love about that question is it was the second set of ears that caught that.
Okay.
I'm the primary set of ears, and we always I go into an important negotiation. I got a second set of ears with me, and we counsel doing that all the time. Now, most people go into negotiations with a companion or with a teammate. Each one is going to handle a different nature aspect of the negotiation,
Mm-hmm.
which means they're not listening when you're talking. What they're doing when you're talking is they're preparing for their turn. Now, in that particular case, I didn't hear that guy wanted out because I'm doing a pretty good job listening, but when formulating responses, I'm not hearing everything,
Sure.
and I'm not thinking. I'm thinking about what I want to say. So if a second set of ears is just there to listen, that second set of ears handed me the note that said, ask him if he wants to come out. I didn't hear that at all. And I'm very coachable, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the second set of ears. You're going to hear stuff that I'm going to miss. And I never really got a chance to ask the gentleman that handed me that note, but I'm comfortable in saying it was just his gut. And your gut instinct is really strong. One of the challenges in life is, which voice are you listening to? Are you listening to your fear centers, or you're listening to your gut? Your fear centers are going to always tell you things are going bad. They're 75% negative. That survival mechanism as a human being, we're wired to be negative from the caveman days. We overreact to threats. In the caveman days, we had to, because if we survived a threat once, the second time it's probably going to kill us. So then the phrase, somebody who's been bit by a snake is afraid of ropes. We overreact in our fear centers. But our gut instinct, on the other hand, is really accurate. And I know that other negotiator, just his gut told him that this guy wanted out. And he handed me the note. I did a 90-degree turn in the negotiations when I got the note.
And it worked with a positive
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah.
Gut or intuition, and I think that, and I think you agree with me, that it works for experienced people. I've said in negotiations with an agent that's new in negotiations, my gut feeling is, I'm like, you don't have enough background on this to understand your gut yet. It's something that I think we really have to kind of think about before we go acting on our intuition, until we get experience like you guys have.
Yeah, and then constantly be asking yourself about your gut, and your gut's a supercomputer.
Right.
So if you got a young guy and an experienced guy like the two of you there, I think that's awesome, because then you have the opportunity to mentor them and teach them more about listening to their gut. So that's an awesome example.
Yeah, I just got to let's just slow your roll there, son. Let's focus a little bit. Tone of voice. I was listening to one of your videos, your late night FM DJ voice,
The
and I
late
got a good
night
chuckle out of that. But I
FM.
thought, yeah, he's right
Yeah,
on, man. That the tone in meetings and
yeah,
negotiations, it
yeah,
means a lot.
yeah. Well, think of it as the spin on a ball.
Yeah.
For me, my first example is the spin on a bullet as it flies through the air, but it's the same principle. It's a spin on a ball, whether it's a
Right.
baseball, whether or not it's a football. Like if you're pitching a baseball, you got to spin the ball to get it to go where you want it to go.
Hmm.
There's such a thing in baseball called the knuckleball, which is where they throw the ball with no spin on it. That thing flies all over the place. The pitcher doesn't know where it's going to end up. Neither does the catcher. The hitter misses it, but your tone is a spin on the ball so that it hits the target. So, I could say, that was a great idea. And my tone of voice is belittling, demeaning. And I could say, that was a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Exact same tone of voice. But the second one is complimentary. So your tone is a spin on the ball, and it makes a difference as to whether or not your words land.
Yeah. The tone, saying the wrong tone can work on emotions. How do you remove or how do you work with emotions from the other side?
Yeah, well, you can't remove them. You can diffuse them.
Right.
And let's draw a distinction in the emotions. Negative emotions diminish thinking. Now, there's a great TED talk called, I think, The Happy Secret to Better Work. Sean Acker, Harvard psychologist, incredibly interesting and entertaining talk. And Sean throws out, you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. And I'm a complete believer in that. There's a lot of other reasons to believe why that's true. The mindset of flow, which is you at your peak mental performance, ridiculous performance, what traditional athletes used to call being in the zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's highly positive. In a positive frame of mind, in the flow state, you think faster, you see patterns sooner, your brain absorbs more data. So positive frame of mind is a good thing. So if you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind, in a negative frame of mind, by definition, you're dumber. By definition. So what you want to do in the interactions is you're not combating emotions. You want to diminish the negatives, usually by simply calling them out. Acknowledgement, not denial. Acknowledgement of a negative has been demonstrated over and over again to be the most effective way to diffuse it. If you look angry, I'm going to say it seems like something made you angry. Now, that's going to diffuse it if you are angry. If you're not, you just simply correct me, which is a good thing because correcting is very satisfying. So in a negotiation, your job is to diminish the negatives by calling them out, calling out the elephant in the room. You don't get rid of the elephant in the room by denying it's there. Look, I don't want you to think there's an elephant in the room. That's a denial. The person says, well, are you kidding me? It's right there. When you say, look, there's an elephant in the room there. Look, there's some peril here. There's some problems here. There's a big difference in real estate. Getting a deal signed doesn't mean it's going to close.
Right.
And that's a real estate agent's real job, is to navigate the entirety of the process. And that's why, in my opinion, real estate agents will always be needed. And the good ones with the emotional intelligence will always be at a premium. No matter how hard the industry outside forces try, online listings, list your own house for free, pull the data on your own, price it yourself. What do you need an agent for? Look, you need an agent.
But that's something, that you brought up. You said a lot of us take negotiation as a battle. You look at it as as a opportunity to collaborate, rooted in empathy. I think if we take that mindset, we're going to be a lot better off. We're going to close more deals.
Agree 1,000%. One of my favorite books that I still recommend to a lot of people, Jim Camp's book, Start With No. And the changes, nuances I made on Jim's thinking. He always called the counterpart the adversary. And the adjustment is the adversary is the situation. If you're negotiating with somebody, each of you are faced with different aspects of the same problem. That by definition means it's a collaboration. Whether you recognize it or not, you got to collaborate in some way. And so if you take that attitude from the beginning, this is a collaboration. The other side is not an adversary. The first subtle psychological thing that does is it removes you as a threat. And as soon as you remove yourself as a threat, the other side's head's going to clear of the negativity that we were talking about before. And so the outcome, by definition, is going to start to get better. At a bare minimum, you'll get to the outcome quicker, which then makes you more profitable. If your compensation, whatever your percentage is, you want it to take 3 weeks or do you want it to take 6 months? Same amount of money. Now you're talking about an hourly rate that's vastly different, which is empathy accelerates deals.
Spot on. It brings me to likability in negotiations. How important do you think likability is?
I think it's critical as long as you understand you have complete control over whether or not you're likable. You have no control whether or not they like you.
Ooh, that's good.
And so then how can you be likable? Just be upbeat, even
Yeah.
playful, even. Playfulness is a superpower. That makes you likable. I heard a stat, it's very unscientific, but based on a source of I heard it from, I believe it to be accurate. It said you're 6 times more likely to make a deal with somebody you like. Even if you liked them and you didn't make a deal, the residue of the likability is going to carry forward in your industry and your reputation in the next deal at your time you deal with them. So you have complete control whether or not you're likable. Whether or not they like you, that's on them. Just be likable.
You know, sometimes that's kind of difficult, but I get what you're saying.
Often,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like a few deals were going through my head from the last couple of weeks. How do I know when it's time to close somebody? I mean, the negotiation you were doing, there had to be something that triggered you, or okay, I got them. I got what works for everybody. It's time to close this deal. Where is that?
Um, as you get into more specifics, the more specific you get, the closer you are to outcomes, then you start asking questions like, you can even say it like, it seems like got this about wrapped up.
Okay.
You're going to you're going to test it. And usually it's what I just used was a label. It wasn't a question. The label is an observation. The other side feels in control when you throw a label out. You're actually trying to close the window at this point in time. You're trying to nail this baby down. You don't want the other side to feel that. You want them to feel that it's still collaborative. You want them to make aware with you. Are we at the finish line? Or is there something I'm missing that's going to bite us in the very near future, which is going to mess all this up? So seems like we just about got all this nailed down is a great label to throw out to see if you're at the point of closing where the other side does. You don't want them to feel that you close them because there's a negative aspect to that. You want them to feel like they brought it to a close, because if they brought it to a close, they're more likely to perform.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, have you ever lost in a negotiation?
Oh, of course.
Okay. How did you
Of
recover from
course.
that?
First of all, the mindset to start with.
Right.
My former boss, Gary Nessner, preached over and over and over, best chance of success. And I had a hostage negotiation go bad in the Philippines. And at the time, I was extremely successful up to then. Like
Right.
I was batting 1,000. And then I realized the words that come out of my mouth, best chance of success means there's no guarantee. So something's going to go bad. It's inevitable. Hostage negotiators got roughly a 93% success rate, which means 7% of the time it ain't happening. It's either not going to happen or it's going to get ugly. So just the recognition that there is no perfection. You just want something that works more than anything else.
Yeah.
Then you're in good shape. Then if you lost, you went bad, you learn. You go back and you ask yourself, what are the yellow flags that I ignored? Not the red flags, but what were the yellow flags? What were the little things in hindsight that my gut was telling me that it was a problem that I ignored? Then whatever you learned is probably going to be worth more than the lesson cost you.
After you were negotiating a kidnapping and something, if it worked or it didn't work, did you just sit down afterward and analyze with you and your team? Did you just sit down and analyze, okay, this is what we can do better next time?
Always. Yeah,
Yeah.
we always did. And the first one that I had go bad, and it went bad in a big way. we did sort of our after action, discussed it, and we were satisfied we did everything we knew how to do. My reaction to that was, okay, so that means we don't know enough. And then I started looking for answers in other places because if we'd exhausted our knowledge, then I thought, all right, so we got to go outside. And that's actually what got me collaborating with Harvard in the first place because I was looking for outside expertise that could put a new set of fresh eyes, another angle, another approach from how we were looking at it. And the Harvard guys were extremely helpful. Sheila Heen, Doug Stone, Bob Bordone, Bob Manukin, all very helpful.
Do you ever have one negotiation that went really well and you analyze it afterward? You went, oh shit, we could have done this better even.
Yeah, to quote the great Irish philosopher Colin McGregor, I
Oh,
win.
now you're reaching, Chris.
Yeah, he's a philosopher.
Yeah, I guess.
Uh,
In his own mind.
but you don't learn much from victories. You kind of pat yourself on the back, and so no, as a human being, I don't really ever remember us going back and analyzing when things went well. Uh,
Mm,
but it didn't look. It's hard emotionally. It's hard
yeah.
to say, this wasn't a loss. This was a learning experience.
Yeah.
But that's where you really learn when things go bad.
You said something in one of the videos about stop getting people to say yes. I was like, wait a second. That's what we do in real estate. We want people to
Yeah,
say yes all the time. It makes us feel
yeah,
better. But can you
yeah.
walk us down that one?
Yeah, well, the three kind of yeses, commitment, confirmation, and counterfeit. And so many people are trying to get you to the commitment yes with the confirmation. Do you like air? Do you like water? Do you
Right.
like money?
Yeah.
There's so many stupid questions out there that effectively are that. Like, would you like to make more money? Would you like to stay in a five-star hotel for free?
Yeah.
Come on. These are these trap micro agreement tie down nonsense. Now, yeah, it works, but let's go back to this percentage um, thing. Yeah, you make deals with yes. You're playing at the Vegas table where your win rate is 15 to 20%. What about the table where the win rate is 55%, 60%? A company that we were coaching that was at one of our trainings in Chicago just a couple of months ago. They switched their entire closing methodology from yes-oriented questions to no-oriented questions. Just the closing methodology. And they jumped from 12% to 60% just by staying away from yes. How do you stay away from yes? Instead of saying, does this look like a good deal to you? You say, is this ridiculous? Is this a bad idea? Do you disagree? Are you against? It takes some practice to rewire your brain from yes to no, but you can ask the exact same question with a no, because while yes feels like a trap, no, saying no feels like safety. And this gets back to the illusion of control for the other side. If I say, do you agree? Instant concern in your brain as to what are you letting yourself in for if you say yes. There's so much concern over the word yes and the do you agree question that I know lots of lawyers and serious business people that just simply say, well, I don't disagree because they're horrified at the hidden pitfalls of every yes, even when it's not there, because they're conditioned. So many people have left a bear trap in the yes that nobody wants to step into it. So yeah, you're making deals, getting people to say yes. Your win rate is lower than it should be. I guarantee you that if you switch from yes to no oriented questions, do you disagree? Is this a bad idea? Are you against? Is this ridiculous? Is now a bad time to talk? I guarantee you an instantaneous increase in your win rate, not changing a single other approach.
I agree. In almost all the videos that I watched, empathy and emotional intelligence were a key part of a lot of the conversations. It feels like you're a firm believer, and I am too. How do you how do we get started in really taking a look at empathy and emotional intelligence as a salesperson?
First of all, define empathy as simply demonstrating understanding.
Right.
It's not sympathy. The real big key to why I started collaborating with Harvard in the first place, because I knew we were completely aligned that empathy was this neutral observing tool. I mentioned Bob Manookin before. He wrote a book called Beyond Winning. It's a book principally about negotiation for lawyers. Second chapter is called The Tension Between Empathy and Assertiveness. Great chapter. Everybody that comes into my company, if you want to come work for me, I make you read that chapter and then explain it to me. Bob says in his book, empathy is not about agreement. It's not about even liking the other side. It's completely neutral. So go back and redefine empathy, not as sympathy, not as compassion, just as completely seeing where the other side is coming from. That's the first thing. When you start doing that, then actually you get smarter. You're better at actually assessing a situation. And it makes it easier for you to check in with the other side. And in extreme cases, you can show empathy to the other side when they are violently opposed to your circumstances. When I'm working terrorism in New York in the 90s, and we have a trial, criminal court against a legitimate Islamic cleric. The guy really had all the credentials, legitimate Islamic cleric. Simultaneously was urging people to kill other people in the name of the religion. And in the US, we don't find religion being an acceptable exception to murder. So we're going to lock you up.
Yeah.
And all the Muslims that testified against that cleric voluntarily because they didn't believe in murder either. But they would be leery of me from the beginning. So I would sit down with them and I'd say, you believe that for the last 200 years, there have been a succession of American governments that have been anti-Islamic. That's empathy. Because I never said I agreed or disagreed. I said, you believe. Mm-hmm. And they would look at me and they'd be like, yeah. And then I wouldn't follow up, but we have a First Amendment. I would never say that. I would never explain why they were wrong. I would just lay it out there fearlessly. And that's empathy. I didn't agree. I didn't disagree. I didn't necessarily even like what their perspective was, but I didn't take a position on it, evaluating it in any way, shape, or form. I said, you believe this is how you see things. And I was comfortable in laying it out there like that. They found me to be a straight shooter. They felt like they could rely upon the things that I said. And it's as simple and as difficult as that.
You have to constantly be thinking. One thing that you're extremely good at was when the timing to bring humor into it. When I was watching a video and you were on CNN and they asked you a question about how you feel about the hostage situation, it got me on CNN, didn't it? Or something like that. I did.
Yeah.
Good God, you took a risk there, but I mean, it was spot on. It was. How do you know that timing? Is it instinct? What is it?
Yeah, well, it's being willing to accept humor within the context of the moment.
Right.
And so I use humor a lot. I don't tell jokes, so to speak. Actually, I use dad jokes all the time because I want to watch your body language to see how openly you react to a dad joke.
Sure.
I love doing it in a Zoom meeting. I want to see who's going to be the most honest about their body language. And you tell a really, really painful dad joke.
Yeah.
And a person on the other end goes like, oh, God. I'm like, okay, this guy's honest with his body language. I can watch him for reactions. Yeah. But humor that's appropriate to the moment. And it is gut and it is practice. And if it's appropriate to the moment, but it's too soon, they may be annoyed by it, but they'll still forgive you because it's appropriate. And then afterwards, it's a powerful tool. Self-effacing humor is empathy with humor. And it can be extremely powerful. It can be very charming, and it can be very disarming. So how do you get good at it? You practice it. Try to make it appropriate to the moment. Making fun of yourself is almost always acceptable. Making fun of the other people Now, now you're risking. But if I can get you to laugh with me or at me,
Yeah.
it's extremely effective.
Yeah. But if you're not really sure, just don't do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the only way you're ever going to get sure is by practice.
Right.
And at that point, I have a very clear recollection of that interview on CNN.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there listening to all this, and I'm like, look, I just can't pass this baby up. But I've been practicing at it for a while. You gotta,
Right.
gotta get your practice. So your gut has that experience you referred to earlier with the youngster.
Yeah.
Where you going to get the experience? You got to practice.
And it works. That you got me thinking about the power of the pause. Are in negotiations, a pause can do a lot in a negotiation. Can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah, and it most of the time it helps people think. And even if you're faced with an accommodator, if you go silent, they're going to talk. They're going to start talking, which is great. So you use silence to let what you just said sink in.
Yeah.
You use silence to think and listen versus hear. Hearing is I can repeat the words. Listening is I understood the words. So it's an analytical thing. So comfort with silence is a tremendous asset.
I've got two people that I've told that you were coming on. I asked for questions, so I'm going to give one of them's kind of funny, but
All
Amy
right.
Calandrino asked, has there ever been a time you couldn't find a tactic to deploy, and what was that like?
Wow.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I probably come close. I mean, to me, my bailout skill is a mirror, just repeating the last 1 to 3 words of what somebody said.
Okay.
And so when my practice level is sharp, you know, whether you label or mirror, it's kind of like whether you're right-handed or left-handed. I label mostly, and I got to practice my mirrors. The repetition of the last 1 to 3 words. When I was at the Chase Manhattan Bank in Brooklyn way back when, I got caught completely off guard a couple of times. And fortunately, my practice level, I just resorted to a mirror in the moment. So I'm sure I've been stumped entirely at some point in time, which is one of the reasons why you got to keep your practice up.
Yep, exactly. Then I've got Kyle and Sarah ask, how can I negotiate it so my teen takes out the trash and makes her bed consistently?
Yeah, well, what you really want, the parental position, you're helping your kids think.
Yeah.
So are you trying to get them to do what you tell them to do? Or are you trying to help them build good habits that'll lead them forward in their life? So, you know, how do you do that with the kid? The question is, look, how are you going to be successful in life if you don't build good habits? You don't make them think about it.
Right.
You know, how are you going to be collaborative if you don't want to be part of the team in the house? How do you want us to look out for you when you won't look out for us? These are how questions are designed to make people think. Now, it doesn't matter how they answer, especially if they're a teenager. A
Right.
teenager's head is going nuts over all the hormones that they're going through the mid-teen years. And not only are they going nuts, but then all their peers are going nuts, and it might be the most confusing time of their lives. They're picking up bad habits from their peers. So it's hard to get through to a teenager at all. So these how and what questions aren't necessarily designed to trigger immediate answers or immediate compliance. What they are designed to do is to make your kid think. And that's the best way you'll equip your kids moving forward.
Also a good place to practice your negotiating skills.
Amen. And practice
Exactly.
your ability to not get upset.
Yes, exactly. Because then it goes south real quick. Let's talk about your your summit. Why don't you break it down for us, please?
Yeah, all right. So it's March 17th and 18th. It's either 16th and 17th or 17th and 18th. I should
We're gonna
remember.
post it. We'll put it up. We'll put a link on the video anyway. So
All
that.
right. So
Yep.
St. Patty's Day in Louisville.
Oh,
We are in Louisville because Louisville's a cool place. Everybody has a conference in Austin. Everybody has a conference in
yeah.
Anaheim, Dallas.
Great city.
Great cities, but everybody's going there. We
Mm-hmm.
stumbled over Louisville recently because we're actually putting out a bourbon at about the same time period. And Louisville is a smaller, quieter place.
Hmm.
That's just cool. Like it's got this great history
Yep.
and they got great food,
Good bourbon.
good bourbon, but you don't got to drink bourbon to enjoy the food in that town. They got great food in all the
Yeah, they
restaurants.
do.
So Louisville's a destination for that reason. 2-day mastery summit. Come prepared to make a quantum leap. Now, we coach you to get a little bit better every day, just a little bit better every day. And you sign up for the Mastery Summit, we're going to help you get ready because in a 2-day immersion training, you're going to make 6 months of progress in 2 days. Now, why does that happen? Number one, it has to be 2 days because your brain bakes in the knowledge picked up that day while you sleep. It's a neuroscience proven fact that the real learning takes place while you sleep. A couple of months ago in Chicago, I got an attendee at the end of the day is trying to get me to do something, asking me yes questions, and I am not complying at all. And I thought her brain was going to melt. She turned around and walked away. And I even, she said, "Would you please sign my book?" I said, "No." She said, "Won't you please sign my book?" I said, "No." And then I looked at her and I said, "No matter what question you ask me, I'm going to say no." So all she had to do was, "Are you against signing my book?" And I would have said no and I'd have signed it. But she hadn't got it into her mental synapses yet.
Right.
Next morning, she walks in. She says, "I know you're going to think I'm slow to learn, but is it a ridiculous idea for you to sign my book?" I'm like, "Bam." It baked in your brain overnight. She woke up the next day fully functioning faster than she'd been the day before. So that's why you want to come to a 2-day training. Now, the last kicker is we're going to credit a third of your ticket price towards coaching
Mm.
because negotiation is a perishable skill. You come out of that 2-day training having made a quantum leap forward. We don't want you to lose it. The shelf life, without paying attention to it, we don't want you to fail as bad as I failed a year after I was trained on the hotline. We want to keep that from happening to you. And that's why if you come to the summit, if you make the quantum leap with us, we're going to rope you into coaching so that you don't crash afterwards.
I it's such valuable. I mean, just watching your videos this week. I mean, typically when I'm researching somebody, I'll watch a couple videos, you get to understand it. I mean, I think I started on Sunday night and then Monday night. I was watching all these videos, and it's a great refresher. I learned a ton. So I thank you for that. I did have one last question because as you were talking, I was thinking about a situation that we had recently in our office. We've got one of our top agents is up against a guy, and he goes, "I'm a negotiator. I'm a negotiator." How do you out negotiate and negotiate? Well, you don't out negotiate him, I guess, but how do you deal with that?
Well, if first of all, if somebody comes at me like that, I'm like, awesome.
I bet you did.
You are vulnerable to control.
Yeah.
Your ego is so vulnerable.
Mhm.
So I'm going to say, wow, you sound impressive. And immediately you're going to love that. You're going to start to drop your guard. So I'm going to use self-effacing humor. I'm going to use emotional intelligence on you. I'm going to give you the illusion of control. And I'm going to pepper you with what and how questions until you give me the deal I wanted all along. One of the secrets to negotiations is how do you let the other side have your way? That guy pronounces himself a great negotiator. I'm going to what and how till he gives me my deal.
He negotiated himself right out of that deal. It never got put together. Our
Yeah,
agents
well,
did.
right. And people walk away from me otherwise. I
Yeah.
hate walking away from deals I should have made. I
Yeah.
will walk away from deals with annoying people,
Yeah.
but I hate missing a deal I should have made.
Yeah. I get you. Chris, what's next for you?
Wow. Yeah, the coming year is going to be amazing. We're expanding much more into the real estate, residential, and commercial space. We got a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to be getting outside of the country a little bit more as time goes on
Right.
to book sales all over the world. It works in every culture. We want to train and coach all over the world.
I'm going to make sure there's a link on the website. Actually, the book is already there. You know, if I put it up there a long time ago. I'm a firm believer in it. I'm a firm believer in everything you guys do. It's incredible. So thank you for taking the time for coming on today, Chris.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it. For those of you watching, if you could, please give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.